Number 2, let's have a look at what happens when we have diastasis. So, I'm going to see if I can get this. So, here's our rectus abdominis. So, those are 2 big muscles, the six-pack ones. And then we have our TVAs, internal obliques, external obliques. This is our skin, and we often have a nice, lovely layer of fat going over there as well. Now, when we have diastasis after pregnancy, which is going to happen, the linea alba is what gets stretched. So, see now that there's this distance here, and it's that connective tissue that's been stretched out between the rectus abdominis. And depending on how far it's been stretched will depend on the gap. Okay, so remember we would measure the gap by width, by fingers, but what we're interested in more so is the depth that it goes down. Because if there's tension still in here, we're good. It doesn't matter. But if there's no tension and our fingers keep going down into our stomach, that means that we need to work on this. And how we work on this is by working our TVAs, our internal obliques, and our external obliques. Because see how all this connective tissue is intertwined, okay? So they all kind of wrap around and go like this around all the muscles, and they pull together. So when we pull on our internal and our TVAs and our external obliques, and we pull on them, this pulls on the connective tissue. And when that pulls tight, this becomes tight, and our fingers won't go down into the depth of it, okay? So that's what's key. We want to pull to tighten this linea alba here. Now, what also will happen is if we work our rectus abdominis, so our six-pack muscles, so as we start working those, they're going to get stronger and they're going to come in closer together. Okay, so they're going to come like this. Shh. And this is where if your TVAs, internal obliques, and external obliques aren't doing their job, we have issues. So what tends to happen is in diastasis, we get this doming. So right now, the rectus abdominis are trying to come together, but we have no tension on our linea alba. And what happens is this comes together, no tension here. That causes that doming, which is that doming, tenting, combing, whatever you want to call it. But that's where that comes from, okay? Because our rectus abdominis are coming together, so that crunch motion brings these together, but there's absolutely no tension here. So what happens is that linea alba, which has been stretched, has to buckle, okay? Now, it can sink. So for some people, it sinks. And tends to happen, if it sinks, it tends to be because you're holding your breath or you're sucking up your diaphragm instead of, so you're sucking it up under your ribs. So you're flaring your ribs out and sucking it up. So that tends to happen for some people, and that if they do that, that tends to go sinking, okay, instead of the doming. Okay, so we're bringing our muscles together with our head crunch, our crunch, sitting up, double leg lift, like any of those movements, but we haven't bothered to activate our deep core. So because our linea alba has been stretched, we get this doming or combing, okay? Now this only happens with somebody who has diastasis. If we have no diastasis, so no stretching of the linea alba, you won't ever see this doming, but what you will see is bulging. Okay, so see now we don't have this linea alba stretched. So this would be somebody who doesn't have diastasis and they're not loading their core correctly. And this causes this bulging. So I sometimes call it bread loafing. So you look at it like this. Now, this can also happen with diastasis. So it kind of depends. Some people will get the bulging because they've managed to kind of reduce their gap enough, but they haven't reloaded their core properly, so they get bulging. So bulging can happen if you have diastasis or don't have diastasis. If you have this rectus abdominis and you find you're bulging, what happens is your rectus is overworked and dominant, and your TVAs, internal obliques, and sometimes external obliques are just too weak. They can't deal with it. Sometimes your external obliques are strong, but because these two are still weak, then you still get this doming, bulging position. What we want to do is we want to remove any bulging, because now look what happens when you're bulging like this. It's really pushing against that diastasis. And if you have recovered or regaining a functional core, so let's just say you're at stage 1 functional, so you're firm, and when you engage your TVAs and you feel really good. Now you might start thinking, I can go further on with my ab work. And you probably can, so that's awesome. But let's say instead of going to single leg lifts and single extensions and really working that one leg or working your breathing with it, you go straight to the double leg lifts. What might happen is you might get this bulging, and then we're putting a whole load of pressure back onto our gap, all right, that you just regained function of. And that is going to cause you to push out on your diastasis and open the gap a little bit more, and then cause it to weaken again. So because you're not working your TVAs, so you're not creating that tension. So you won't get to stage 2 because you haven't progressed through the stages. So let's have a look at what a balance core does in a double leg lift. Balance core does this in a double leg lift. See how all the muscles are working. So your TVAs are pulling, they're creating tension. Your internal obliques are pulling, they're creating tension. Your external obliques are pulling. It's all pulling and creating tension. And your rectus abdominis are working. And now in that double leg lift, yes, you get this touch of a rise from your rectus working, but it's not the same as that huge bulging, okay? So you can, let's see if I can work this. I can't work this. All right, there we go, I can work this. I was a little confused for a moment. So there's your bulging versus your core working correctly. So this is what we want to be able to do. Because the more we do this, the stronger everything becomes. The more exercises you can do, the more you can carry on going, okay? So just keep thinking about, how do I get a balanced core? If you see any bulging or doming, it's likely that your TVAs and internal obliques are not working. They're not doing their job. You need to take a step back. You need to either re-engage your TVAs, because sometimes we lose it. So you might do 3 leg extensions and then suddenly start seeing it bulging slightly. And that's going to be time for you to say, whoop, take a step back and engage, and then do 3 more until you say, oh, no, it's gone again. Stop, engage, do more. And over a few weeks, you'll be getting sets of 10 with no problem, even sets of 15 with no problem, right? But you need to keep re-engaging, because if you keep going, you're just going to get a bigger and bigger bulge, which means you're going to be putting more and more pressure on your abdominals. So you just keep going. So you can stop, re-engage. If when you stop and re-engage, you still see the bulging or the doming, then you're not ready for that exercise. Simple as that. Take a step back. What's the progression prior to that? So let's just say you're trying to do a full leg extension. Then maybe you need to be doing feet drops instead of an extension, or knee lifts again. So go back to the exercise that you felt like you were going okay with, and keep doing that for another week. And then the next week, try it again. The key is that you need to keep progressing. You need to keep trying, but you can't progress too fast.